Hi, welcome to Franchise Mondays, a new segment on this channel where I revisit a lot of known franchises. Today I'm going to be talking about the Amityville Horror franchise. Now, the Amityville Horror franchise has about 14, 15 movies, and it would take me a year to talk about every single one of them. So for this video, I'm going to be talking about the first 4 films in the franchise. Now, the first one, I had heard about it for the longest. Everyone was telling me it's a generally scary movie, that it terrified audiences when it first came out in the 70s, and it was even based on a book. The book was based on true events. Now, the whole story of the movie is a family moves into a house where murders took place before, and weird things start to happen. So it's a very simple story, and it stars James Brolin and Margot Kidder. And as I'm watching this film for the first time, I'm like, okay, it's nicely shot. It's a great creepy house. The image of that house is very, very known. But as the film progresses, nothing happens. The scariest thing that happens in this film is money disappears, and no one knows where the money is. It's like, ooh, a ghost took money. It's like, shit, I didn't know we need money in the other side. But the other thing that happens is a sequence where a guy is sitting down by the fireplace and he's going insane, and out of nowhere a cat appears. It's like the cheapest frights I've ever seen in a movie. And there's a lot of unintentional humor in this movie. There's a sequence where a nun comes into the house, and I think the nun is related to Margot Kidder's character, and she's asking her to stay over for some tea. And she says, no, I can't stay. I feel terrible. Oh my god, I gotta get out of this house. I gotta get out. It's like, no, stay. Oh no, I have to leave. And so she's leaving the house. She gets on her car, and literally halfway her trip, she stops and she starts puking. It's the most unintentional, hilarious scene I've ever seen in my life. And on top of that, there's a priest who comes in to bless the house, and then flies start attacking him, and it's not scary, it's just laughable. There's also a sequence with that same priest who's like trying to bless his church or something, and then the ceiling breaks and the piece of the roof falls on his head, and he falls on his eyes, and he's blind now.
Blind.
Nothing scary happens in this movie. It's I don't understand how this movie was considered groundbreaking at the time. You can say most of what happens in this movie is subjective. By that I mean, like, oh, maybe the husband is not really seeing ghosts. He's just going crazy because he just had to buy a house to please his wife, and he's raising 2 or 3 kids that are not his. So it's just stress. And there's a sequence where he sees like a vision of like a pig, a huge pig. How does this play into the rest of the movie? It doesn't. Then the house starts trembling, and then they just leave the house. And that's the whole movie. There's really nothing to it. Now, Amityville 2, The Possession, is a prequel to the first film, and is directed by an Italian director who, I don't think he went on to direct anything else. I don't remember his name right now. Damiano Damiani, that's the name of the director. This one is actually good. It's actually better than the first film. And it tells you the story of the murders that happened before the first film, before the family, the James Brolin and his wife who moved into the first house. So this movie, it kind of has some contradictions. They changed the names of the people who live in the house. I think it was for legal reasons, I believe. I don't understand why, because the family was mentioned in the first movie. But they just changed them. I think the original name was the Defoe family, and they changed it to something else. So the second film, which is called Amityville 2, it's a prequel, and the story is that this kid gets possessed by the demon who's in the house, and some really weird stuff happens where he starts seducing his own sister. A lot of weird incest going on. And there's also some unintentional humor in this movie, but it's not like the first film. There's actually some really creepy parts where they utilize good image trickery, like where you see, like, out of nowhere, a blanket just flow from one room to the next and just covers across. And the later half of the movie kind of turns into like an Exorcist ripoff, but a very good one. Like, there's some weird parts where his skin is like pulsating and he looks all possessed. Whether this is realistic or accurate to what actually happened in that house, I don't know. But I was actually genuinely scared, so I would recommend the second film. Now, the third movie was released, I think, a year or two after the second film, and the second film apparently was a success, so they released the third one called Amityville 3D. And in the early mid-'80s, it was actually a gimmick to get people to come to movie theaters and watch a lot of these 3D films. Some of them that you might have heard of are Jaws 3D, Friday the 13th Part 3D. Amityville 3D was no exception. But this movie, a lot of people hate Amityville 3. I don't hate it, but this was really trying to sell the gimmick of it being a 3D film. There's a sequence that it's so slow where someone is getting burned in a car, and they're slowly zooming in to the skeleton, and it's popping out at you, and it's like, really? Like, this movie's not available from what I know of in 3D, so it's only available in 2D. But the story in this film is that these group of paranormal activity people who are trying to debunk the whole story buy the house, and they find out that there's people who were living there who were trying to pretty much swindle people to think that, oh, there's evil spirits living in this house, and maybe your loved one is still around in this house. So these people who buy the house, use by the house for the sake of it, and trying to prove to everyone that all the possessions that happened previously are not real. Now, the curious thing about each subsequent sequel is that the house, in the exterior shots, it always looks the same. It's the same house, but the inside always looks different. And from what I remember, the second film, which is the prequel, it looks completely different. And this third film, the house looks exactly like the one in part 2, but it looks completely different to the one in part 1, interior-wise. So the story here, again, is the guy buys the house and he's trying to debunk the whole thing. And they have cameras set up around the house to find out if there's any weird stuff happening, kind of like The Conjuring. And once again, they change the names of the family members from the previous film. They're mentioned, but I think the name is changed once again. This one is not scary at all. It's very run-of-the-mill. The lead actor is perhaps one of the most wooden actors I've ever seen in any horror film. He has zero charisma. All his lines are delivered very cheaply. Not much scares, but I would have to say, and they're probably in the minority, but it is my opinion, I think this is still better than the first film. It's weird because the first film is considered such a grandiose horror film up there with Halloween and such. But the second and third film are, in my opinion, superior, especially the second one. So the third one was the last movie that was released in theaters. It was a failure. The gimmick of the 3D didn't work, and the movie itself wasn't exactly that good. So part 4 came around, and part 4 is called Amityville Horror 4, The Evil Escapes. And this one was released straight to TV for CBS. And you're going to laugh at the premise of this movie. Part 4 is literally, because I don't want to ruin, but the third film, the house is no longer there. It's the house gets destroyed. So in the fourth film, a lot of the possessions that were in the house were sold in garage sales, and one of the lamps made it to the house of someone else, and the lamp is possessed. So literally the premise of part 4 is literally an evil lamp. It reminds me of a skit from Family Guy where Stephen King is trying to sell his latest book to one of his publishers, and it's basically, ooh, an evil lamp, an evil lamp.
Okay, for my 307th book, this couple is attacked by a lamp monster. Ooh, ooh,
You're not even trying anymore, are you?
But even as dumb as it sounds, it's actually good. They managed to make a fucking lamp scary. I don't know how, but they did. And the movie takes place in a different house again, and it's just a family living there, and a lot of weird shit starts to happen. People start missing, and there's a lot of unintentional humor in this one too. There's one sequence where this kid thinks it's a clever idea to play around with a chainsaw, like, oh my god, chainsaw. And he literally, of course, loses control of the chainsaw. And it's not because it's possessed, it's because he's a fucking idiot. He turns the chainsaw on, so he can't control it. And everyone's trying to help him. And everyone in this movie is kind of retarded. Like, I'm no expert, but I wouldn't get close to someone who's holding a chainsaw, particularly a kid. But I was just laughing my ass off. If that was my kid, I'd be like, damn, I failed in life. But anyway, the movie itself, a lot better than the third one. Not as good as the second one, but way better than the first one. To me, most of the sequels are better than the first one. And I know most people are saying, oh, that's blasphemy because the first one is considered a classic. So these are the first 4 films in the franchise. 1, 2, and 3 you can find in a box set released by MGM. It's widely available. Part 4 is a little hard to come by. I think it was released through a lesser-known company. So the sequels that followed, 5, 6, and 7, use the same premise of something that's possessed. And I'll be talking about that in another review, where I'll be talking about all the other Amityville Horror films. So I hope you guys enjoyed this review of the Amityville Horror films, the first 4 films in the franchise. If you have any questions, comments, just leave it in the comments section down below. And until next time, bye.